Because of the training I had, which really entailed 8 to 9 hours a day being alone in a practice room, being so in touch with yourself, recognizing that the slightest nuance in movement could change the sound, also recognizing the way sound works, vibration and acoustics, just the slightest little movement, one way or the other, how you position your finger, how you stroke the piano, is it percussive, is it like a stroke? Every little nuance would affect the ultimate sound. Because I was so in tune to that, I wondered if there was a parallel spiritually.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Katia Bolotin. She is a musician, a songwriter, and a composer. She is also the author of the newly published book, Making It Relevant, Timeless Torah Wisdom for a Changing World. So welcome, Katia. Thank you so much for joining us. With all that, you're joining all the way from Israel, and I know it was hard to get us up and running, but we are here now. And it kind of reminds me a little about your story, because you've had quite a windy story, a path to get to where you are. So tell us a little about a winding road. Tell us a little about it. Where did it start? It started, I think, in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes. Life is a long and winding road.
Right.
So my story begins in Cleveland, Ohio. I was raised there, and I think we want to fast forward a little bit to where I first became connected and inspired by my relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. That came about when I was in college. I was a little under 18, and I was a music student at the Cleveland Institute of Music and taking education classes at Case Western Reserve University. I happened to just one evening find myself in the Hillel on campus, and there was a Chabad shliach, and they were sitting and just letting us ask any questions we wanted. It was really my first experience talking to a rabbi one-on-one. I was brought up in the conservative synagogue and wasn't really active even in that. My family, my mother came from what she called an Orthodox family. My father did not. We were very musical. My father was a composer, and like myself, so I was exposed to that, and Jewish music and so on, chazanut. So that particular night was a turning point in my life, and such a turning point that it resonates for generations to come, because today I'm a grandmother and I'm living in Israel, and that decision that night, and it just shows you how certain turning points in life, watershed moments, resonate. I was asking questions, surprisingly enough, about reincarnation.
Why did reincarnation interest you so much at that point?
Just the idea if life is something that is just temporary here and where we are, if there are long-term vibrations, if there's long-term consequences, if things go on. And also, because I'm a musician, my whole day was spent with vibration, with frequencies, with feeling music vibrate within me, emanate without. And because of the training I had, which really entailed 8 to 9 hours a day being alone in a practice room, being so in touch with yourself, recognizing that the slightest nuance in movement could change the sound, also recognizing the way sound works, vibration and acoustics, just the slightest little movement, one way or the other, how you position your finger, how you stroke the piano, is it percussive, is it like a stroke? Every little nuance would affect the ultimate sound. Because I was so in tune to that, I wondered if there was a parallel spiritually.
Wow. That sounds so amazing, so awesome. And it's interesting because you talk about the vibrations and how just a little shift changes so much. And yet
Everything.
you see this in your life, the shifts that you made changed for generations to come. past generations, but I guess we're gonna get to that. So you had a lot of questions
Yes.
that night. You were asking questions to the shliach, and
He was maybe 5 years older than me. I'd never even known that rabbis were that young, you know.
right.
He had a lovely, charismatic wife, and I could relate to her too.
Mhm,
And also, I was seeking role models in life, and I
mhm,
still am. That's interesting.
mhm,
When I speak to groups, I often say, don't think that it ever ends with finding yourself. We continually are finding ourselves. We're continually looking for role models who fit the journey we're on at a given moment in time.
hmm. That's
And they
beautiful
were the
because
right
we're
fit
always
for me.
growing.
They were the right fit. Oh,
Right.
goodness, always.
Wow.
So what happened was I was with a group of friends, and that evening, I, for whatever reason, I don't know, my mother was there standing in the back. And part of it was Chabad had just come to Cleveland. Our family was very much involved with the planning and the bringing of Chabad to Cleveland.
Hmm,
There was no such thing yet, really, as Kiruv, as we all know that Chabad was at the forefront of that. Now it's something that's very mainstream, but Chabad were the innovators at the time. So I think my mother was there with some of her friends and watching a big room of like 100 students, how they interacted with us. I think the rabbis were being observed to see whether or not it was worth it to invest in bringing Chabad to Cleveland.
hmm.
And
Interesting.
and
Now,
and they did,
what
and we did.
what made them reach out to Chabad? I guess that they knew that they were into reaching out.
No, I think it was something, no, not at all, in my opinion. I
Mhm,
think that things were stale. I think that
mhm,
Judaism needs to continually be relevant. And I feel that some of the models at that time in the community I lived in weren't serving the generation that I was a part of
mm,
as um, as efficiently as it should and as it could. So I think, like anything else, the Federation was behind it too, the Cleveland Federation. A lot of funding was garnered from numerous places. It was a community effort. And I believe that Chabad presented something that was needed, but yet not recognized that it was
mm.
needed.
Right. So I guess with your questions, you made it very obvious that it was relevant. Became very relevant.
Absolutely.
So how did
And
that
then
change your life?
oh, wow. So that night, the evening ended at 11, and the rabbi, whose name was Rabbi Leibel Alevsky, he's still Rabbi Leibel Alevsky, and his wife, Dora, took
Mhm,
us to their parents, Rabbi Zalman and Shulamis Kazan. And we were there till like, who knows, 2 in the morning. I had never had an experience like this. She's bringing out bagels and cream cheese and scrambled eggs, and it was just so homelike. The shlichim, their children were sleeping then in sleeping bags on the living room floor.
mhm,
We were just not used to something like this. We didn't know that such a thing existed. We didn't recognize that people were so devoted as these shluchim were. It was my first encounter with them, that they were willing to do whatever it took to inspire other Jews to become more aware of their Jewish identity and to actualize it.
wow. And what impact did that have on you? Like, when you saw that, what
Tremendously.
Mhm,
It was totally different than the world that I was used to, which was so much more formal, and rabbis weren't approachable. It just was amazing that I was having a conversation with a rabbi. I'd never even met rabbis so young. So to fast forward, my cousin and I, um, Karen Polonsky and I, well, Karen Waxman at the time, were very close. We were sent from Cleveland to Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're met at the airport by Rabbi Manis Friedman
you
and
put
Rabbi
what do you
Feld.
mean by you were sent?
Well, they asked us if we wanted to go, and we were sent. We flew
Mhm,
there,
mhm,
meaning
okay,
I don't exactly remember, but we went.
mhm.
And it was unreal living in the beautiful, beautiful, spacious house in Minnesota. And again, this home was totally designed to answer the questions of people who were searching and seeking to deepen their understanding and commitment to Torah life.
Wow.
So I left 2 weeks later a very different person.
So you
I
stayed
was
there for
totally
2 weeks.
convinced.
What inspired you there? Like, what was it that pulled you in?
It was amazing to me because there I also met another cousin of mine who was a little bit older, and she was like a madricha. And so she was there. I felt very at home. I felt I was still troubled. I remember I was troubled the first time that I observed a Fabrengen and they're drinking L'chaim's. And interestingly enough, I'm a very, very conservative, very straight line girl. I don't drink. My mother and father were totally against it. We had no alcohol, only maybe wine for Kiddush. And why not? Because my father, who again was a very accomplished composer, a few times took me to nightclubs when I was like 17. And he wanted me to see what happens to musicians who are taking drugs or drinking, specifically to make sure that I'd never do anything like that. And to
Right.
let me know, look, it affects their rhythm. They're not precise. They're off, but they don't even realize how inaccurate they're playing because they're too inebriated or high. So to me, that was something that really was appalling. So the first time I saw a Fabrengen, I see what's going on and the dancing, I was ready to leave. I said to my cousin, that's not what I'm here for. And I remember they saw my displeasure with it and explained to me their high on the idea of being totally connected and creating this relationship with God that involves just being happy from Torah. And this was a new idea that they were so happy because of their closeness, that they were achieving a relationship, a proximity to their creator through their learning and the wisdom of the Torah. So I ended up staying 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Wow. And you
And then I went back again, went again.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, went again,
Oh, when
another
again?
2 weeks. And that
And
was it.
how did you
So
like bring that into your regular everyday life?
well, when I first arrived, I was wearing pants and a t-shirt. And that ended right then. I mean, the whole concept of even defining myself from a Torah perspective, which is integrated into every detail of life. I never had any idea that Torah was so broad, so all encompassing, and also can be expressed by the way you express yourself outwardly through dress, through appearance, through demeanor.
Hmm. And why did you why did you buy that? Why did you buy that idea? Because I know a lot of teenagers are very against that. Like, let me wear what I'm comfortable with. Why did that appeal to you?
It appealed to me because I was looking to be genuine. I was always, again, I truly believe that it was my musical background and passion that informed the journey that was to come. And of course, everything is divine providence. Hashem put me in the situation I was in, spending so much time perfecting and excelling in a craft that involves so much inner depth and so much skill and so much practice and so much attention to detail and nuance that I was trained from the get-go to notice every detail and to be very discerning. I've been always discerning and having to think, is this something I want to connect to? But then there was another challenge. I was already very established in the life I was living. There was nothing wrong with it. There was nothing wrong with me other than the fact I wasn't living an observant Torah life, which I could have chosen not to do. I came from a very moral family, Jewish values, all of that, but not more. So I had to make that decision right then and there. what do I want with life? And there was a big cognitive dissonance at that moment, because all that I was trained for was all of a sudden it was a problem. It was a big problem. But that's not a problem because life is filled with challenges. I just kind of
Well,
started to,
I'm wondering how you integrated those teachings into your life. Like here you came from what seems to be a privileged life. You were doing very well. You know, you were succeeding in your craft of music
yeah,
very
I'd
well.
say
You were
privilege.
right, and you were many hours you were spending on that. How did
Yeah, and
this newfound knowledge become integrated into that?
I also went to a stellar school. I went
Mm,
to a school that was very competitive. I went to a school where competition and winning competitions was just a normal everyday thing. I also was very used to not being so involved in the social aspects of campus because it didn't interest me as much as the goal I was achieving. Kind
mm,
of like in competitive sports where you realize you're not going to go to the party, you're not going to go to this. You'd rather
mm,
spend your evening preparing for what's more important and not losing sight of your ultimate goal. Now, that also resonated with Torah.
for sure, for sure. But your ultimate goal at that point was your crafts, your music.
Not only that, appearing in orchestras, winning competitions,
Mm,
winning the money that was necessary to all of that.
mhm. And you were really good at that.
Sure. Won a
And
lot of
how
competitions.
so how did you make I mean, I'm sure it made did you have to make sacrifices to, keep Torah and not be a part of that world?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
But I prefer not to call it sacrifices. I really prefer to call it upgrades.
Oh, that's great. I like that.
Really, it wasn't. It was, I have this idea that anything that appears to be a setback is really a setup.
Mhm,
You see? It's a
mhm.
setup for something that you may not know yet, but you're being set up by the setback. And if you have the patience, you're going to find out. Like
Right.
this evening with all of the technical difficulties,
Right.
right?
That's right. Wow. Okay, so you were seeing some kind of setup s moving up an elevation. How did that happen? Like, at
Well,
what point did you realize that?
I had always thought and was raised, and all of the modeling around me was that being at the top of your game in the world of classical music and competition was totally actualizing your potential and being the best version of yourself. And that's all that mattered.
Mm,
And everybody around me was doing that. And all of a sudden, I'm being exposed and speaking to people that are doing that without anything other than themselves. They are the instrument.
mm,
Their craft is crafting character traits, having the best responses possible when you have a plethora of possible reactions to any given situation. It was all different, but it was all the same. It was a parallel universe. Do you
mm,
understand?
mhm,
Meaning the spiritual choices, the spiritual refinement was something I was already comfortable and very familiar with from the way I was living my life, making choices every day. I never thought I was being sacrificing by not going with a bunch of friends to the movies on Saturday night and spending the evening in the practice room,
mm,
because I get a lot more out of that in the long run. And that's what everybody I knew did.
mhm. So you had a long-term goal, you had a goal in mind, and this was but at the same time, you at one point, you kind of changed you were in parallel program, but you had to change lanes, right? Because
That's a good way of putting it.
right, and how did that happen that you changed those lanes? Like, was there something that motivated you to say I mean, you spoke before about this cognitive dissonance that you were experiencing. At what point did you feel like, "I'm ready to embrace it?" Or was there a choice
Well,
that you
my
needed to make?
my whole life was cognitive dissonance, but to some extent, cognitive dissonance follows us throughout life. I always tell this when I speak. It's not a one-time choice. The choices that we make are every day. At this point, every day, even though I've been an observant Jew for decades, there's certain things I have to choose every morning. My attitude, how mindful I am of my relationship with the creator of the universe. How do I express that outwardly? How do I channel that to my relationships with people? You understand where I'm going?
100%.
These are choices I make throughout the day and every day.
Right.
Maybe today I'm going to take the day off, but no, I wouldn't take the day off because it's like taking the day off. I'm not going to breathe today. How is that going to turn out? Right. So I felt the same way. It was just making different choices. Basically, at that moment, the decision was to move from one criteria and life structure to another.
Right.
And you know how they always say when you're working out, or I am a big fan of Bar 3, which is popular where I came from in Cleveland. And at the end of every session, she'd always say, we no longer need to embrace the things that don't serve us anymore, that no longer serve you. So at that point, I was right there. Is this serving the person that I ultimately am striving to become? And I didn't even know exactly what that would be. Is this serving my desire and my aspirations to reveal to myself who I want to become?
Right. Wow.
So guess what happened? You wanted me to repeat a story that we spoke about on the phone.
Yeah,
It
sure.
kind of leads to that.
I find it so interesting that divine providence was happening in that story right at the time to help you make that decision.
And it continued to this day, Hannah. So I was in my junior year of college. I was not 100% keeping Torah and mitzvot, but I was going in that direction. I was beginning, for sure, the way I expressed myself in clothing definitely changed, but still had more to go. But again, even the way you express oneself every day is something, it's a choice we make every day. I want to really emphasize that none of this was a one-time choice. These are choices that are ongoing, and they become more refined and elevated with time. So at that point, where I was at that point, I had to make a choice that today would never be a choice. But at the point, the choice was, am I going to continue to perform on Friday night? And that's a part. I mean, how could you be trained to be in an orchestra if you can't perform on a Friday night in the United States?
Right. That
Right?
was probably the night that you performed, the only night, right?
And as the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, if you're a soloist, all right? And that was what I was trained to be. It's funny to even talk about this because I feel that I don't connect to that person anymore, Hannah. It's like I'm talking about somebody that they told me about her, and I read about her, and I saw a lot of pictures, but I don't relate to her anymore.
Right.
I'm so far away from her. It's almost like it's comical to me, but I'll go back just for the sake of our conversation. So I had a real big decision to make. And it was, my whole body felt like I was weighed down by the weight of this. I had to play a recital on a Friday night. And there were other Jewish people that were professors in my program that, what a big deal. And I remember going to ask if I could have it changed to Thursday. And unfortunately, the person I was asking was also Jewish. And I feel that maybe my request was intimidating. Well, we play, other people, it wasn't received in a very positive way. So here goes the story. I really can't honestly tell you how this happened. I don't know if I was looking for a way out, but I don't think I would hurt myself, especially my finger, because it was so valuable to me and I put so much time. And I was chopping a salad. And I think really what probably happened was that my mind was so distracted by my thoughts.
You were so upset about the whole situation. So
Yes.
yeah, so on your
And by
mind.
the way, I still cut my fingers here in Israel. I cut my fingers at we have these sharp, sharp knives for dicing,
Right.
and you just touch it and you're oozing blood already. So I believe it was a similar situation. So I was cutting up a salad, and all of a sudden the tip of my finger is just it was very badly injured. I had to have a number of stitches, and then it was wrapped up, and I'm done. The decision was made.
Hmm. How did you feel about
And
that?
relieved, tremendous relief. And it was a great excuse. It
Right.
wasn't this, it was easier to hide behind that than having to explain my newfound religious thoughts to
Right.
people that weren't really in a place to accept them.
Sure. But I imagine after
Also,
that, yeah, go ahead.
I didn't have the inner confidence to express myself at that time.
Understandably, of course. But I imagine after that, it took some time till your finger healed. So were you able to play music, or were you able
I had
to?
to go through physical therapy. I had a good 6 months off,
Wow.
and now I had 8 hours to 9 hours of free time a day.
To think, to do other stuff,
Yes, then I
to
started
study?
changing things. My finger had some nerve damage. Look, I'll always be able to play in a very impressive way, but to a captain, I'm no longer a captain. Somebody else might think, and you understand what I'm saying? I'll never be able to get back the damage that was done. And I don't want to brag, but most people wouldn't be able to know it or hear it, but people that know would hear the difference again. Like, remember the Olympics when somebody's ice skating and they're giving her the numbers, the slightest little thing off and she's
Right.
down in the ratings? That
Sure.
was the world. It's the same thing. So guess what happened? Something good came. I switched to composition and started composing. So that was great.
Was that because
It
of
gave
the cut in your finger, or because of your new decision about your priorities for
both,
Friday night?
both, both, both.
Mhm.
My teacher, when you have a teacher in the world that I was in, they're not just a teacher, they're a mentor. And I remember he was really upset with me. He said to me, quote, and he's no longer alive, and he was a wonderful man, but he said, why would God want you to slap him in the face and not use the talents he gave you? I'm just so frustrated with you because I never, I wasn't working as hard anymore. I stopped working that hard. And then I was directing my energies into the area of composition, which my father was thrilled with because that's what he was. So that was great. I was a happy camper at some point. I could always play, but I never practiced 8 to 9 hours again after that accident. However, it also allowed me the time to further deepen my pursuit of Torah wisdom and started a lot of learning, spending a lot of times reading. And it resonated to me so much, I cannot even tell you. It became my new oxygen.
Beautiful.
It was
Now
all for this. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. It was all for?
There's a Hasidic concept. I'll say the Hebrew and I'll translate it. Yerida l'tzorach aliyah. When we have a descent in life, and again, like a setback, it's really a setup for an ascent. I'll say it again in case some of your listeners are not comfortable yet with this idea. This happens to everyone in life, that it appears that things are going down. We have a disappointment, we have a setback. But if we recognize the way God runs the universe, this is a system. This is something that's set into the way the world operates, that for something greater to be revealed, first we have to experience some temporary darkness. That's why, according to Judaism, a day begins at night. The darkness has to precede and then dawn, daybreak, a new day. So I already saw that this is what happened to me.
Did you see it at the time? Because so often we go through things that we see it in retrospect. We see later on how it was something, it was a descent for the sake of an ascent, but at the time we don't see it. Did you see it at the time?
Yes, I did. From the
You
get-go,
did.
I saw it.
Mhm.
Because first of all, I was changing. The more that, see, that experience going back to Minnesota, where I, for the first time in my life, learned Chassidut, Tanya, was looking at just the creation of the universe and man's place and the purpose of humanity and the Jew in particular within his place and the wider lens on life. I think I needed some time to really let that become a part of me and integrate it. And once that initial exposure was there, I would not be the same person. And I didn't want to be more. I didn't want to go back to where I was. And I didn't regret it either. And I didn't feel I was missing out. I really felt I was upgrading my whole modus operandi. I was upgrading the way I saw life through a different lens.
Beautiful. I understand at one point you and your family also had an audience with the Rebbe. Could you tell us a little about that?
Twice.
Twice. Wow.
Well, this was not my doing. It was, again, my cousins. I'm a part of a family in Cleveland, the Waxman family, and the Chabad is Waxman Chabad in Cleveland. So I'll give total credit where credit is due. My beloved cousin, who passed away this last year, Mel Waxman, may he rest in peace. He was a visionary in our community, and he arranged for our cousins and any family members who wanted to go to New York to 770 and have Yechidus with the Rebbe. He made it so that on Sunday, rather than having to wait in that long line to be able to see the Rebbe, that we had an appointment. And I felt almost embarrassed because it was like we just walked right in, everybody's waiting. I felt a little uncomfortable. We went to the airport, we had somebody waiting for us there, took us directly. It was just so comfortable. But I do recall as I was rounding, going into where the Rebbe was standing, his piercing, sea-like powder blue eyes. And I just felt very strange. It was almost like there was this magnetism to this man. And the moment it was my chance to talk to him, I didn't really have much to ask him other than, could you clarify if I'm making right decisions? I need clarity.
How
I
old were
told
you
him a
at this
little about,
time?
yeah. And he gave me a bracha, just everything would be kol tuv, which means everything will be good. At the time, I didn't think that that was very much to tell me. But
How
later I
how
was
how
told
old
that
were
that
you,
was great.
Katia? How old were you then?
I probably was 18,
So
somewhere
you were in
around
the
that.
middle of those decisions that you were making.
Yeah,
Yes.
between 18 and 19, because I went more than once. And to be really honest, Hannah, I can't remember exactly, but I went more than once. So, but it was all under the age of 20. That I can tell you for sure. Well, that was something. But then I had to think afterwards, what is this something? Am I going to just look at it as, oh, that was nice, interesting experience, and same old, continue? Or was I going to look at this as something to propel me to initiate further growth? And I was on that path.
Wow. Very nice. Really nice. So I want to fast forward a little bit. I know you got married, and I know you started out with one voice. Tell us a little about that.
Oh yeah. Well, it doesn't exist anymore, by the way. But
Mhm.
it had a nice run. I love to speak in front of audiences of any size. I'm as comfortable speaking to 10 as to 4 to 500. My performance background really helped me overcome any sense of self-awareness in front of a camera, in front of a microphone. Part of being trained as I was and I share this with I was also a mentor for many years up until I left Cleveland, with chamber orchestras and string quartets and performers, teaching people how to overcome any kind of discomfort being in front of an audience.
Hmm.
And I know it so well because I had to go through all that myself. So the idea is not being aware of yourself, but being more aware of you are here to serve others.
Hmm.
And that if a person focuses on what they'll think of me, how good am I, how do I look, what if I make a mistake, they will. But if
Right.
you get yourself out, if you take yourself out and you're there, what can I do to give to others? What can
Hmm.
I do to be so expressive that someone will feel alive more, will feel more in tune with themselves, with their emotions, with their history? So that was funneled
This is
into
all
this
such
new
a
venture.
It's interesting because this is such a Hasidic idea to take that I of yourself out. And once you take that I of yourself out from the picture, you can service in a much grander way where you're no longer so worried about your every slight moment that you might, movement that you might be doing or something that you might be doing wrong. You're very self-centered about yourself and aware of any mistakes that you might be making.
Exactly, Hannah. And all of that I learned from being a highly trained musician and
Hmm.
performer,
Interesting.
and
Another
was able
parallel
to,
between the two worlds that you're talking about, right? Yeah.
yes. But the world of performing can oftentimes bring out the worst in people's characters and in their personal lives, because just like everything else in the secular world, it's very competitive, but oftentimes for wrong reasons.
Mhm.
And people compromise core values. And in the midst of it, you lose your sense of self. And the more you compromise core values, there's another thing, and I'll get back to one voice and I'll explain to you how it connects. Creative people are not just musicians. Music is a way to channel creativity, but creative people are also people that are interested in self growth because you're changing your baseline.
Mhm.
You're taking something that is very basic or flawed and you're reworking it. You're putting a lot of effort and thought into creating something that is upgraded and far more refined and something you can feel better about. And it doesn't come naturally. It takes a
Right.
lot of effort.
Mhm.
And that, of course, relates to everything in life, putting your best face forward, the best version of yourself, even no matter what obstacles, challenges, setbacks are going on in your personal life, showing up to life every day and trying to give it your best. So I was aware in my community to begin with, actually, I was approached by one of the Jewish high schools at the time, and an NCSY and a couple of different organizations. They wanted me to partner with them in a concert. That's how it all started. It was called the Levachad, with one heart. And it was a really big success because I'm very good at producing concerts. I've done many, many of them. And not just concerts, events of inspiration, that's how we call them. So it'll be with dance and music, and then the inspirational speaker, which was always myself, and then maybe others, and get them there, almost like the gospel, did you hear me? Is this what we want? Do you want to be more? Do you realize you can be more? Then let's do it together, ladies, something like that. And
It
again,
was it
it's
was all for women and girls, I'm assuming,
only for women and girls.
right?
That was the beginning. Also, I have to tell you, I'm also a singer. I'm not the best singer, and that's a different story. That happened in Israel. After I graduated from college, 2 weeks from that day, I made Aliyah, but
Wow.
I'd never visited, never been here even once. And I made Aliyah because I thought at the time Israel is like a marriage, and I wasn't yet married. But I figured it's a commitment. I'm going to stick it through. So I stayed for 5 years because when you make Aliyah back in that time, you have to stay for 5 years, or otherwise you have to pay back whatever money they gave you. And I went to college here again, Hebrew University, got another degree. But it was at this time that I went to the Rubin Academy of Music every day, and I would practice piano there because I was connected to them through Cleveland. And I started singing one day, and someone knocked on the door, and he comes in. It's a man. He goes, I've never heard this voice, the one that you have, because he's in charge of the vocal department. He wanted to meet me. And this is really a little insane, but it happened. He told me that he is managing a duo called Shelley and Yoram. And he used to have them sing all over Israel. They would sing in hotels, they'd sing on army bases. And Shelley had just given birth to a baby, and they needed someone to take her place who's a fast learner. Would I be interested in thinking about it? And I didn't think more than twice. I go, I want to do it. Absolutely. So my whole life changed then. I learned all her songs because I learned fast. I wore her clothes. It was the same fit. And for a whole year, I was singing with Yoram. And we went all over the place, army bases, hotels. We sang in front of the prime minister, the president. It was so much fun. Then I learned about Kol Isha, which I had no idea about. Someone mentioned it to me. You keep Shabbos, but you know,
Kol
all of
Isha
that.
means that a woman does not sing in front of a male audience.
Yes. And the reason for that is, and I embraced it immediately, quite honestly, the moment I was told, I had to understand, and that was the end of that career. It ended right then. I had such a desire to be an authentic Torah Jew, but there were a lot of gaps I didn't understand. And my understanding of why women don't sing publicly in front of men is the loss of innocence, in a sense, that when a woman sings, she is exposing a very private, very intimate side of who she is. And you just don't sing in front of anybody, and especially men, because the only person that you want to expose that intimate, very deep essence of yourself would be to your future mate. It was too intimate. And the fact that I didn't even recognize that it didn't even, what's the big deal, I thought. That bothered me also. My initial response bothered me because it just underlined how much more I was still not in tune with the Torah life and rhythm of Torah life.
Right.
And that was really hard for years. I went back and forth with the Kol Isha issue for a while, because when I came back to Cleveland, I was asked to sing in different concerts with Israeli singers, with chazanim, with chazaniot. I actually had a decent voice, but I think I'm a much better pianist. But then I finally decided, and it wasn't my husband's decision. My husband was okay. He told me, Katya, it's your decision. And I made the decision. So what I did afterwards immediately started One Voice. That was the impetus, because I wanted to be able to have evenings for Jewish women where Jewish women could sing in a totally Torah environment, and where our voices would not have to be diminished or silenced, but that they could be used and magnified for a greater good. And that was what One Voice was all about.
Right. Amazing. It seems like you keep recreating yourself, Katia.
Yes,
I
do.
I know quite recently you wrote a book, and a lot of that book was, I mean, some of our audience might even know your name, Katia Bolotin, from the articles that you wrote online for Chabad.org. Tell us how that came about, you starting into a writing career.
That has something to do with you, Hannah.
Okay. How's that?
Well, I've always written poetry, but this is my first book. And I must have found something that came online. I don't really recall exactly how this happened, but it was something about, and you would know because you at the time were the editor that I was writing under,
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful editor, to say the truth.
Thank you.
And it said whether they're looking for writers.
Hmm.
Is that true? Because I don't even know how I got connected. I sent in some sample pieces,
I
and you
remember you
said,
sent in things. Yes.
and quite honestly, I don't remember really, really well because so much has happened in my life since that it's not 100% crystal clear. But I was connected to you. You were the person who said you liked my writing. It was very, it was wonderful to get that encouragement because I had not written before.
Hmm.
And I wrote a lot of articles, I think 35 altogether,
You used
maybe
to write
more.
on Parsha, on the weekly Torah portion.
Yes, and they're still being run.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to write a book just on Sefer Bereshit. And my husband, whom I could never do anything in life without his encouragement, because he gives me the space to develop myself. I have a husband, thank God, Katia Bolotin. Without him, I would have never written this book. Because, and you're an author and you've written many books, you have to have time and space to be able to write. So my husband gave me that space and took over some of my household duties so that I wouldn't be interrupted, and was totally all in.
Hmm. And what was the
Also,
point in you writing it?
I wanted to write the book that I would have wanted to read when I was 18. To this day, it breaks my heart that there are so many people of all ages, and especially our youth today, that don't recognize the treasure that is within Torah wisdom. And to me, relevance is primary in life. But the definition that we have of relevance is something that's very temporary. It's trends. Oh, this podcast is really relevant, and this influencer is very relevant. So it makes it seem like relevance depends on the times you're living in. But that is not true. My book talks about timeless, enduring relevance, which is Torah. So what I do, and what I did, I take out key little gems, little diamonds that to me are in abundance in every Torah portion. And since I recognize that we're living in a world with social media where people don't have the ability to focus for a long time, I chose to structure my book so that chapters are like 3 pages. And it's really all about using the wisdom that's in that week's Torah reading, applying it to struggles that everyone may have in their life, and being like a spiritual life coach, using this, you can do more, you can be more. How could you put this into effect and practice immediately? So at the end, and I'm going to plug my book, here it is, Making It Relevant.
Beautiful.
And thank you. So at the end of every chapter, it talks about what you can do. It's not a lot, 3 or 4 ideas that you can put into practice. The other thing also, I am a songwriter and I'm a lyricist. I write all my own lyrics and all my own melodies. And as I told you, I'm a composer. So in every chapter in bold print, the font, I have a few quotes of some of my songs that go together with the thought that I was elucidating upon in that particular chapter.
Right. That's really amazing. Katia, when you look back at your life and the changes in your life, what most inspires you?
The Jewish people. Living in Israel and living in these times that we've experienced globally as a people has, if I ever had a doubt, and it's normal to doubt God, but if I ever doubted, those doubts don't exist, because living in the land of Israel, And being a part of this people, you feel God's presence every second of the day. And we see now that we're living through prophecies being realized before our eyes. And again, setbacks are setups for something greater. And as we said again, that every descent is for the sake of a greater ascent, because that greater ascent needs propulsion.
100%.
It's like being on a trampoline, right?
Right.
So that is my answer. The Jewish people are resilience. But more than that, without the Torah and I see the Jewish people, the Torah, and the land of Israel as the greatest chatima. It's the signature of the Creator, just like there's a signature on a painting. So the land of Israel is God's signature. The Jewish people are that signature that's being represented differently. These are all expressions of one God. We're living in amazing times.
We really are. Absolutely. Now, let's say a 19-year-old is listening to your story. What message would you like them to take from it? And perhaps they're deciding on different life-changing ways in their life, what path they want to go on. What message would you like to give them?
I have the same message and then a different message. A 19-year-old person, regardless of who they are, their religion, their ethnicity, be mindful that there's a creator in the world. And be aware and try to expand and amplify your awareness and recognize that that creator has a purpose for you. And the role that you're playing, no one else can play it. And you may not be able to choose the role, but you can choose through your daily thoughts and choices how well you play that role.
Beautiful.
Be aligned with God's mission for humanity. For a Jewish 19-year-old person, definitely, regardless of their background, there is no excuse today to hide behind a background of saying, oh, I didn't have the right education. I didn't come from the right family. I didn't have the right parents. No, we can parent ourselves. We're constantly parenting ourselves because nobody came from that perfect background and that perfect family. So take responsibility, step up to the plate, and choose, do you want to be a spectator or do you want to be a player in the drama and the unfolding destiny of the Jewish people? I urge you, young people, to be players. And to become a player, you have to know. You have to know your history. You have to know where you're going. And it's like we said, we will do and we will listen. The best way to become closer to God and more comfortable with yourself as a Jew is to actually start observing God's commandments one at a time. Don't wait. Don't wait until you know enough. It's like being a parent. If you waited to know how to raise children, you'd never have any.
Right. Right. Do you ever wonder what would have happened had you not met that shliach and that campus that evening?
Wow, Hannah. I think I would have come about the same realization through somebody else. You know the story in Esther where Mordecai comes to her and says to her, if you aren't going to go into the king, our deliverance and our redemption will come somewhere else. I have no doubt that Hashem would have directed me someplace else, but the destination would have ended up very similar.
Beautiful. Katia Bolotin, thank you so much for joining us and for your inspiring words and your inspiring message.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. What did you think of that interview with Katia Bolotin? I really enjoyed how she spoke about the vibrations of life and how in her music she was so trained with vibrations, and how every vibration that we make in life has such a tremendous repercussion. She went from such a different life to now being a mother, a grandmother. Her parents as well became more religious as a result of her becoming more religious, and her children as well. So it's fascinating how one decision can sometimes really change the course of our lives. But as Katia said, it wasn't just one decision, but it's an ongoing decision, something ongoing that we're constantly making, a choice that we're making every single day, the choice of whether we want to be relevant in what we're doing, and bringing godliness into our lives. If you enjoy watching these interviews, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. You can find us as well on YouTube. Please make sure that you give us a like there, that you subscribe, that you tell your friends, pass along our videos, share our links to your friends, share with them, and let people know about this podcast so that we can get it out to other people as well. We love to hear your feedback, and we thank you so much for watching and being part of this extraordinary community.